Hello, and welcome back to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about recent pop culture and maybe slightly less so the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And, yep, as I say, there's a virus lockdown going on. We're probably not going to mention it a huge amount because you can hear about it elsewhere, but we hope you're all okay, obviously, as I said in the intro last week. And as Alistair can now say himself.
Yep. Sorry.
Alistair loves you, listeners. Alistair loves you.
I had no notes, so I was temporarily thrown. My improv abilities are about as much as a rock. But no, we do hope all of our lovely listeners are well and taking this enforced quarantine period to catch up on some good film and TV. I know I have.
I honestly haven't as much as I hoped, but mostly because we had mice in our new house. So yeah, good news, assemble computer, bad news, mice. Anyway, God knows you're not here to hear about our lives, you're here to hear about films and TV and shit. And this episode, it's mostly TV, as we are discussing the latest series of Doctor Who, which aired a few months ago now, back in, well, it only finished at the start of March, so yeah, but it aired a month or two back, but we thought, we're a geek podcast, we should talk about it, so that's series 12 of Doctor Who, and then, right up to the date, we've got the current season of Better Call Saul. That's season 5, airing now on AMC in America and Netflix in Britain. The Breaking Bad prequel is, I believe, now into its penultimate year, so it'll be finishing soon. Well, next year. Well, maybe next year if, again, they manage to pick up filming due to all this coronavirus. But anyway, all that to come later. But first, Alistair, managed to consume any media in the month or two since we last recorded?
Well, British listeners will be aware that with excellent timing or slightly scary timing, that Disney Plus launched in the UK a week, the day after we were totally locked down by the government. So although I think lots of film companies especially must be despairing at what's happening, especially film companies looking to make quite a lot of money from Wonder Woman and Black Widow films that have been postponed indefinitely, or at least till much, much later in the year. But Disney, I suppose, must be laughing all the way to the bank as they timed this perfectly.
Mickey Mouse rubbing his weird glove hands together in glee.
Yeah, exactly. It must be wouldn't it be a shame if when we launch our awesome streaming platform that everyone was stuck at home and unable to go anywhere and really in need of extra content. Seriously, I have known at least one person said to me that they were on the fence about Disney Plus but decided just to jump for it anyway because, well, going to be spending a lot of time indoors. So So yeah, might as well watch Baby Yoda. But so far, I've been really enjoying it. One of the things that finally
It's being Disney Plus or it being Baby Yoda?
Well, I'll get to Baby Yoda.
Okay.
But as a platform, it's pretty good overall. There's lots of good stuff on there. What convinced me to take the plunge is that it's got all 30 most recent series of The Simpsons on it. So I did inaugurate Disney Plus during lunch when I was working from home by watching the episode when the flu virus gets loose in Springfield. I thought that's the most appropriate one I could think of. So I've enjoyed rewatching some classic Simpsons. And of course, Baby Yoda. Yeah, I've seen the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. I know that probably seems painfully out of date for any American listeners, but yeah, as I haven't yet resorted to piracy, I am legally watching The Mandalorian at our slower, more sedate British pace of life. So I've seen the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian, and yeah, it's a show that had a lot to live up to given all the hype, but so far I've been really enjoying it. Each episode is kind of a good little self-contained story that propels the overall story forward. There's some good action bits. There's lots of great Star Wars things, like the IG bounty hunting droid turns up. There's Jawas, there's some Trandoshans. There's lots of kind of deep-cut Star Wars references. And of course, Baby Yoda is just as cute on screen as he is in animated GIF form or meme form. So we're definitely enjoying finally seeing Baby Yoda.
I have not yet witnessed Baby Yoda, I must admit. I think we're stalling until they've got a few more episodes up. I think the 3rd one went up yesterday as of this recording. So I think it's going to be every Friday or something, unless they're doing 2 days a week. I don't know.
Yeah, I got a push notification from the app last night. So yeah, saying that episode 3 of The Mandalorian is out.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to finally watching it. I'm hoping that in the future they'll have the decency to do a Netflix and stick the original content up at the same time for everyone. I'm hoping this is just a launch strategy, this spacing out The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Because, I gather all the Marvel Disney Plus series have had their productions paused due to, again, coronavirus. So it might actually be a bit longer before they start appearing. But yeah, hopefully when they do, they'll go out to the entire world.
They were all scheduled to go out next year, weren't they? There wasn't any Marvel content for this year.
I think there was a rumour circulating that, or an understanding circulating that originally that Falcon Winter Soldier might be coming out kind of late summer and WandaVision might be either very late this year or very early next. but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It may not be that way anymore, as I say.
Yeah, as a platform, it gets the thumbs up if you're sick of watching Netflix, Now TV, and Amazon Prime, all of which I had. I think I'm drawing the line at 4 streaming platforms. I think I'm going to now have to operate a one in, one out policy. Sorry,
Yeah.
Star Play and Veronica Mars.
Yeah, the only thing I've watched on Disney Plus so far is Toy Story 4, a film I never got around to going to see at the cinema, and I can confirm it's fun, it's okay. To be honest, it probably suffers a bit from comparison to the previous one, which was, of course, the harrowing film that made us all weep for our lost childhoods, whereas Toy Story 4 is merely a fun Toy Story film, with a few nice heartstring-tugging moments, but nothing quite as, oh my god, I've cried so much that my seat is starting to dissolve. I feel okay about having seen it at home on a streaming service rather than paying a tenner for the cinema, but it's still pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up on things like Toy Story 4.
Yeah, that and The Incredibles 2, which is a film I imagine will feel much the same.
Yeah, again, stuff that I missed in the cinema is now a great opportunity to catch up on. Another thing, actually, I'd recommend, although I haven't actually done this myself yet, but it's something I intend to do, is what's also on Disney Plus is all of the short Pixar animated films, and the ones they kind of screen in the cinema usually before a main Pixar feature. And there's some brilliant ones of those, like the one about the umbrellas falling in love, or the one about the volcano island, and things like that. So yeah, if you just want looking for something short and like fun, and they are really, really well done little like short films. So yeah, the whole like section of like Pixar shorts is like a gold mine.
Yeah, I'm also maybe going to rewatch the 90s X-Men cartoon, because the Cinematic Universe podcast are doing a recap thing on their Patreon where they're watching an episode every day or so and doing like a short podcast about it, so I might actually join them on that because I have many warm nostalgic feelings about that 90s X-Men cartoon.
Yeah, I also have lots of memories of that. That was basically my introduction to X-Men. I think most of my X-Men knowledge is from that cartoon and the comics that we read for this podcast.
I think, to be honest, the main things that turned me towards superheroes as a whole were probably that cartoon and the Spider-Man one that was running at the same time.
That's also on Disney Plus.
Oh, yeah.
My partner's been rewatching some of those classic 90s Spider-Man cartoons.
I do remember them being quite good in a slightly strange way. There's lots of filing off of the edges, like Carnage now, instead of stabbing people with his weird spiky tendrils, he just fires the tendrils into them and drains their life energy. And Morbius, the living vampire, rather than biting people's necks and sucking their blood, he has these little sucky pads in the palms of his hands that drain people of their plasma energy or something.
Yeah,
it's all very childy, but it's a cartoon. What do you want?
They did have the quite good sarcastic Spider-Man internal monologue.
Yeah, I think that is one of those things that they did really well in that cartoon, and then everyone's just been waiting for them to do properly in the film for decades. And to be honest, the Tom Holland version is the first time they've even come close to managing it.
Yeah, so again, that probably a lot of my Spider-Man knowledge comes from that cartoon again, until we read some Spider-Man comics for this podcast.
Same here, except it's more until I read some Spider-Man comics at age 10.
So yeah, Disney Plus gets the thumbs up during this time of global freakouts. Why not revisit something from the 90s, be it The Simpsons or X-Men? Anyway, that's what I've been doing during the hashtag lockdown. Nick, what have you been up to?
I've taken in a fair bit of stuff, including finishing the final 2 seasons of *Halt and Catch Fire*, which I believe I've mentioned on this podcast before. I'm not actually going to talk about this at length. My actual recommendation is something else. But yeah, the last 2 seasons of *Halt and Catch Fire* are fucking great, just for the record. I double emphasise my recommendation of this show from whenever I last mentioned it. The final 2 seasons are a very beautifully executed grace note on the whole thing. It's one of these ways in which you can sort of see the characters growing and then making more similar yet different mistakes. They just sort of find some vague sense of peace. It was a nice, for a show about tech people making software, it was weirdly beautiful and elegiac. Yeah, I'd like to double emphasise my recommendation of *Halt and Catch Fire* for having seen the last 2 seasons. And yeah, anyway, the thing I've actually been reading mostly during this lockdown is *The Sandman* by Neil Gaiman. I read the entire thing. I read the original 75-issue series, and then just for good measure I read a graphic novel he did called *Endless Nights*, and then an epilogue that he did recently called *Overture*. For anyone who doesn't already know, by the way, *The Sandman* is a comic series that ran in the late 80s, early 90s, and is basically what brought Neil Gaiman to prominence as a creator. Before he was a novelist, he was a comics writer, and he came primarily to fame working on The Sandman, a very, very extensive revamp of an old DC superhero who basically, it used to be a guy who just had magic sand and controlled people's dreams, and turned him into this sort of looming mythological being who would dream of the Endless. Yeah, the Endless were a family of 7, I think, different beings representing different metaphysical states, all with names beginning with D. Can I list them off the top of my head? It's dream, destiny, delirium, destruction, desire, death, and probably another one. And yeah, the Sandman is Dream, who is also called Morpheus, because in a way that makes perfect sense in the comic, but always is very hard to explain in rambling podcast form. There are different incarnations of these beings. So there's always a Dream, and that dream is always part of the Endless family. But the individual who is Dream sometimes changes. Yeah, it's about this sort of permanent metaphysical being and his attempts to grapple with trying to change with the times and work out exactly what he is. It's very ethereal. Neil Gaiman has a very good grasp of stories that seem very timeless, seem very sort of mythological and inevitable, and very much like they're guided along by fate or something, or they work. And he uses the Sandman, the Dream character, to sort of pivot into a lot of smaller stories based on dreams or people he's come into contact with and ways he's inspired them or ways he's guided them or punished them and stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of the better issues of Sandman, this is very much the standard hot take on Sandman, but whatever, are these individual issue stories which come in between the massive long arcs in which it's just about Dream and his encounters with individual people and how he helps them or hinders them or punishes them or whatever.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So this was a reread for you?
A distant reread, yeah. I read it when I was very young. Well, not very young. I was not a baby reading Neil Gaiman's mature readers comic epic. I was about 18, 19.
Does it hold up, or is there new things you've discovered that you missed before?
It's very Sandman has established a bit of a reputation as the favourite comic of every emo goth kid in the playgrounds, and it is, going back over, it is very moody and leather jackety and self-involved. But the individual stories, these sort of little fables where big metaphorical things happen, all beautifully illustrated by a range of the best comic artists of the time, are still very nicely executed. And I don't know, there's still clearly something to it. The family of the Endless are a very memorable concept. They're a very sort of iconic thing that he's just come up with. Because although the Sandman was a pre-existing character, it was nothing like this stuff. This is something Neil Gaiman just came up with by himself, and if he did it nowadays, to be honest, he would probably just give it a different name and own it himself. But because this was the 80s and 90s where you had to work for Marvel or DC if you wanted to do a comic, instead he's bolted it onto this barely related DC character.
Oh, I see.
Which means he doesn't actually own it, although in a bid to not fall out with him like they did Alan Moore, I think DC are quite careful to get his okay or have a chat with him before they actually do anything with those characters.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, for now, Neil Gaiman does not hate them, and I think they're keen to keep it that way. But it does hold up. I think some of the epilogue after stuff does feel a bit like needless epilogues. But the actual Sandman series, especially, as I say, some of the shorter stories, or some of the stories about individual people under the shadow of Dream.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I know this is one of the sort of seminal works of mature reader comics, that everyone should read, like along with like Watchmen and things like that. And I do remember, in the early aughts, also early to mid-aughts at university, it was very popular amongst the sort of alternative, slightly moody, slightly gothy, sort of leather jacket wearing kind of alternative crowd that I moved in. It was one of the sort of required reading texts, although I didn't actually read it myself at the time, but it's the sort of thing everyone had like the complete volumes on their shelf, so I probably should read it at some point.
Neil Gaiman is very good at turning a very profound sounding phrase. It's very much the sort of thing where I can imagine if you read it aged in your late teens, basically, then I can imagine you reading it and sitting there and just staring into this and thinking, wow, this is just everything, man. This is just the universe, and just taking it into you and it becoming your personal creed. I can see how it might be very formative for you if you read it at that time and are receptive.
Yeah, I read some Neil Gaiman for the first time recently, having seen lots of adaptations of his like comic work and novels onto sort of TV and film. I decided to read one of his novels. I think the first novel he did after being a big deal amongst comics, which is Neverwhere.
Yes, that is, I think, his first novel, yeah.
Yeah. Although, it was originally, I think, supposed to be like a TV show.
It was a TV show, yeah. It was to be honest, slightly rubbish BBC miniseries. Or at least interesting, but clearly underfunded BBC miniseries. Yeah, I think the novel was very much him doing it right or something.
Yeah, and there's different versions of the novel where he's kind of like tidied it up, I think. But I can see how you would go from like writing comics to writing TV, because they're both kind of got this episodic storytelling format. And the novel is quite episodic. It's like each chapter is like, you can see how each chapter would have been like a bit for the TV show. So like they go here to this bit of London and they meet this character and do this thing, and then that sends them on to the next one. But yeah, he can turn a good phrase, Neil Gaiman. He's certainly good at coming up with the sort of slightly whimsical prose.
Yeah, it's one of the only sort of long form comic works he did. I don't think he really did any. I'm sure that there's someone out there screaming at me about his other major, massive, years-long influential work. I can't, off the top of my head, think of another comics thing he did that lasted longer than, like, I don't know, 6 months to a year. Part of me thinks it's a shame. I mean, I assume, you know, he's a sensible, pragmatic guy. I'm sure he's got his reasons why he hasn't worked extensively in comics since doing Sandman. I come away thinking it's a shame he hasn't done more comics, especially recently. But again, I guess the novels keep him busy. The novels and increasingly the TV show running.
Yeah. He's a popular man, Neil Gaiman.
It's in demand, Neil Gaiman, and, you know, comics, for all that it's inarguably the best storytelling form, I gather it's not necessarily the most financially lucrative one. But anyway, if you do ever see Sandman for sale somewhere, especially, you know, there's probably going to be another Comixology sale eventually. That's where I got it. Then yeah, good comic. Worth another look, especially if, like me, you haven't read it or read it so long ago you've basically forgotten it.
Yeah, I do plan to read it at some point. First up, this episode, we will be reviewing the 12th series of Doctor Who, since they resurrected it 15 years ago this weekend, I believe. It's also the second series of Doctor Who, with Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor and Chris Chibnall as showrunner. This series sees the Doctor, Yaz, Graham and Ryan continue their adventures through space and time, meeting some new friends and a few familiar villains. The series finished a few weeks ago, but we're seasoned Whovians on this podcast, and we felt we really had to cover it. So, Nick, what did you think of this whole series?
My opinion of this series does divide kind of quite neatly into two parts, to be honest. For the bulk of it, like the first 8 episodes or so, I actually thought it was decent. I thought it was okay. I thought it was a definite pick-up on last year, but it felt slightly flat and dull. It didn't blow my mind, but it was passively entertaining. Alright, there was one episode that was fucking shit, but there's always one episode that's fucking shit. It's Doctor Who. But the rest of them were perfectly entertaining. My time was passed. There were a few that worked a lot better than others, but I very rarely regretted spending my time watching it, and some of them were even quite good. Nothing amazing. I still think Chris Chibnall just isn't as interesting and noteworthy a writer as Davis or Moffat. I still think he doesn't really quite have that spark. I still think he doesn't come across as having a huge amount to say or bring to it, other than here's some sci-fi stories. But yes, I thought the first 8 or so episodes were fine. Then we came to the 2-part series finale, which I thought was... I gather we're going to do a spoiler gap later before getting into this in detail, but I thought was a slightly rubbish retcon, boringly delivered, and kind of soured me a bit on the whole series, to be honest. But I will get a note in before I start complaining. But the first 8 episodes I was mostly entertained by, except for the third one, which was shit.
Which was the third one? Is that the Tesla one?
The third one is the one where they go to that spa or whatever it is, and it turns out to be Earth.
Oh, yeah.
That was garbage, Alistair.
That was quite bad. Yeah.
The rest of it, however, apart from the finale, I thought was decent to good.
Yeah, weirdly, my notes are quite similar. Yeah, that I thought that it was overall a good series, sort of let down by the finale. This series felt much more to me almost like Chibnall kind of trying to do Moffat or doing a Moffat impression. There was an arc like across the series linking sort of all the episodes together, which I suppose is not uncommon for Doctor Who or for any show really, but there was obviously what linked everything together was this big mystery surrounding the Doctor's identity or the Doctor's past. Yeah, that was also somehow related to the nature of who the Time Lords were, or things like that. So it had this big kind of question about the Doctor as a person, kind of linking the whole thing together, struck me as very Moffat, especially like one of the early Moffat ones. And like a lot of the Moffat series, it relied on a lot of interesting mysteries being thrown out that made me think like, this is interesting. I wonder if this will pay off in an interesting way, and invariably it didn't.
Yeah, as I say, I guess I'm still refraining from going into the details of the ending reveal, but the bulk of it, I thought, although it did hit some mysteries pretty hard, particularly there's one episode midway, in fact, yeah, exactly midway, episode 5, which pivots very hard on the mysteries. There's a lot of stuff being thrown out. That's where, I guess I'm still allowed to spoil episode 5. In episode 5, another Doctor appears, and that's Dr. Ruth, as I believe people are calling her, the character played by Joe Martin. And of course, Captain Jack makes a cameo to warn us about the lone Cyberman, which is both sort of teasers for the finale. But that episode aside, the mysteries were kind of just threaded in as like little phrases and stuff, and I was able to enjoy the episodes for the most part. They pretty much stood alone, except occasionally someone would say, "The timeless child," in an ominous voice, which is very Russell T Davies, actually. That's what he did a lot. Sort of,
yeah.
Rather than having mysteries overwhelm plot, it's just that every so often someone would say, "Bad wolf," So yeah, I thought that most of that works pretty well, as I say, aside from the stupid Leisure Centre episode. It meant the series itself mostly hummed along okay. The opening two-parter was an enjoyable sort of little romp. I liked Sacha Dhawan as the Master.
Yeah.
I enjoy how, for the most part, I think one way Chris Chibnall has kind of tried to distinguish himself from both Davis and Moffat is I think he's told the actors to stop hamming it up quite as much. You know, stop really pivoting on the spot and playing to the camera. But I mean, maybe it's just a symptom of the way Jodie Whittaker has chosen to play the Doctor mostly. But there's not as much of that in this show as there used to be. Except, apparently, when Sacha Dhawan turns up as the Master and is allowed to ham it up all the way to the butchers.
No, he does that a lot, yeah. He's very good.
It's fun. It comes across as possibly even more funny and refreshing than it might have been if it had happened in one of the previous showrunners, because it's just so uncommon compared to the rest of the show. Like in previous seasons, you had Captain Jack and the Doctor himself and other villains and guest characters running around doing that sort of acting all the time. But because the Master is the only one doing it, it's actually quite fun. It's actually quite refreshing to see it. I mean, to be honest, although I am probably going to give the series finale both barrels later, his Master did at least make it a bit better.
Yeah, no, he was very good playing the Master. I liked how there was an unexpected reveal that he was coming back as the Master, which they managed to keep, I think, quite well under wraps. I mean, the series trailer had like the Cybermen and the Jadoon in it, which very much meant that we knew that these villains were coming back, or these characters. I guess the Jadoon are sort of neutral villains, but anyway, we knew these characters were coming back, but they managed to keep the fact they were also bringing back the Master quite well under wraps, which I liked. Yeah, and he was good. Obviously, it's always good to have each iteration of the Doctor has usually a different iteration of the Master as their foil. And Jodie Whittaker and Sacha Dhawan have good chemistry together, and I think bounce off each other quite well and work together as some of the great Doctor Master pairings, like David Tennant and John Sim, or Peter Davison and Anthony Ainley's back in the 80s, or Roger Delgado and John Pertwee. For example, there's been, and I'm just naming Master Doctor combos now, but like Michelle Gomez and Peter Capaldi. But so that was good Master in the tradition of Masters, and was well done. And there was some interesting episodes thing. I mean, there were a few that were, I think, lent quite heavily on we need to do something about the environment. We need to take the environment seriously.
Yeah, there were two of those, weren't there?
Yeah, there was the aforementioned Leisure Centre on Desiccated Earth episode, and there was a present day one with evil plastic in the sea. Obviously, I don't disagree with the message. I do strongly believe that we have to take the environment seriously and do something about the looming environmental catastrophe that's happening. But I guess it was about as subtle as a sledgehammer. But then again, this is a
Doctor
show.
Who, guys. I don't come to this show for nuanced or subtle issue discussion.
Mainly a show primarily aimed at 10-year-olds. And I think, similar to what we said in our review of Series 11, is that Chibnall does seem to be pitching at a slightly younger age range than maybe Moffat and Russell T Davies was. And nothing wrong with that. But, I mean, those episodes did have some good plots and some good twists.
I mean, the plastics one did.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were two episodes about the environment, one of which I think was actually one of the best episodes in the series for me, or at least certainly in the top 2 or 3, and one of which was definitely one of the worst.
I did like the one with the plastics in the sea, they did a lot of globe-trotting, jumping around the world. That one was quite good. There was the one about the sort of creature that fed off nightmares and that had, we need to take mental health seriously.
That was a weird episode. I'm not yeah.
I thought it was really good right up until about 2/3 of the way through, when basically there was just like about 2 solid minutes of exposition of just basically explaining what was going on, a la sort of History Channel documentary. I mean, they had some quite cool animations, but I was a bit like, if you took this to a writers group and said like, and then there's a 2-minute monologue, which is a significant amount of time on a TV show, just filling in everything you need to know, people were like, could you try and be a bit subtle about this?
I mean, firstly, it wasn't 2 minutes, it was about 5. And secondly, yes. Yeah, I was with that episode for a while, but I thought the massive amount of monologue cramming in the middle just really killed the momentum of it a bit. And also I felt like the mental health message got a bit muddled somewhere. Like it felt like it disappeared for a while in the middle while they did all their wobbling around with gods, and then sort of came back in a really jarring way at the end.
It kind of reminded me of that episode back from the Matt Smith years called The Power of Three, in that when I looked at it, I was like, there is quite a good idea in here. It probably would benefit from being a 2-parter with a sort of cliffhanger and give it a bit more time to pad the idea out. Whereas you kind of crammed it down to 45 minutes and it's just sort of been rushed and paid off in a sort of unsatisfactory way. But, I guess I admire the kind of scope and ambition of it.
Well, yeah, one of the things I've complained about the Chris Chibnall era is the lack of scope and ambition, to be honest. The fact that often it seems a bit flat and boring. I don't think Chris Chibnall does sci-fi amazingly. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that basically all the good episodes take place in either the past or the present. Like, I feel like a lot of his attempts to leap onto other worlds or futures or into, like, vague abstract sci-fi territory often end up being a bit rubbish.
I agree with you on that, yeah.
That is my main Chris Chibnall observation, to be honest. He does not seem to be the man for, like, leaps of imaginative sci-fi. Like, all the stuff with the alien gods or whatever they were in that episode, Can You Hear Me, I believe it's called, because I've got the list in front of me, felt a bit generic and slightly flat and just not as imaginative or interesting or exciting or mind-blowing as he probably wanted it to be.
Yeah, whereas he did do, I think, some good, historic ones. Like, I quite liked the Tesla episode. That was quite clever. It was interesting, having last year I watched The Current War about the rivalry between, like, Westinghouse and Edison and Tesla. Bringing that in was, again, quite an interesting sci-fi take on that. I quite liked the one with the Romantic Poets by Lake Garda, is it? In
the Frankenstein one.
Yeah.
That and the Plastics one are probably the two best of the series, I think. I thought those two were really good.
I did really, I thought they did some quite clever stuff playing around with like actual historical events. The aborted vacation, which led to the creation of Frankenstein during the summer that never was. Probably, again, a period of history we should be revisiting during the fact that we're going to probably have a summer that never was this year as well. But anyway, enough virus chat. I liked that episode, and my only main disappointment is that similar to the Face the Raven one in one of the Moffat Capaldi series, in that this is a really good plot that annoyingly seems to, the interesting, satisfying ending I want from it has kind of been decapitated in order to have a pivot to the finale sort of strapped to it. I don't know, I'm cobbling my metaphors together like a Frankenstein monster of discarded bits of corpse. But anyway... But anyway, I felt that like the good ending to that episode was denied by the sort of pivot to cliffhanger leading into the finale. Anyway, I did enjoy that episode.
I thought the ending still just about worked myself. I thought they did an okay job of incorporating, the lone Cyberman as the monster. I thought one of the other things that was kind of interesting for me this series is that the three companions thing doesn't really seem to be working that well at the moment. Like, I didn't get the feeling that any of them really got that much to do.
That was one of my main notes, is that it was a bit companion light and we didn't really get much companion backstory stuff. We got more in the last series because when obviously they were introducing them and setting up a bit more, and there was more about, say, the relationship between Graham and Ryan and things like that, which was all right in the last series. We got a bit more Yaz in this series and a bit of her backstory, although it just seemed to, again, throw out some sort of vague things that were never really fully developed. Like, she got almost no characterization in the previous series, so she gets some in this series.
It seemed like almost all the companion characterization this year was in that mental health episode we mentioned.
Yeah.
That had a bit of stuff for all of them, and the rest of the time they just kind of hung around.
Yeah, it was a very companion-light series, especially as this was a Doctor mystery series. Generally, I think with a lot of Doctor Who, they tend to do, there's a mystery about the Doctor, or there's a mystery about the companion. That kind of works when there's one companion.
Yeah, I think having three of them at this point really did make it more obvious that they were very much focusing on the Doctor this year, and the companions are all just hanging around with very little to do. I hear rumours on the internet grapevine they might be slimming down the number of companions next year, and I can't say I entirely blame them, because this series felt a bit needless.
I see what Chibnall's trying to do, which is that for many years, well, since they brought Doctor Who back, they've done the Doctor with female assistant stroke companion is kind of been, well, male Doctor with female assistant has been the pattern. It's very reminiscent of, from classic Who, the Pertwee or Tom Baker years, or like early Tom Baker, when that's a male Doctor, female companion, or some of the later ones, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, so era again, when it's like male Doctor, female companion, and Doctor Who's been very much done in that model. And I like the fact that Chibnall's like, okay, I'm going to have a female Doctor, I'm not going to just invert it and have female Doctor, lone male companion. What he decided to do was to maybe go to like the Peter Davison era or the late Tom Baker era, when they had three companions and there were like dynamics between the companions as well as their relationship with the Doctor. And I like the fact that was doing something a bit different, just as I liked it when sort of Rory became a full-time companion, which kind of again mixed up that dynamic a bit. I mean, I like what he was maybe trying to do, but it's just a bit light on companion characterization. They were just sort of there for a lot of episodes.
Yeah, as you say, I think it was an interesting idea, but I don't know if this series was really designed to accommodate them. But on the plus side, I did think Jodie Whittaker herself as the Doctor, perhaps as a result of not having to give as much time over to the companions, I don't know, did come into her own a bit more this year. I felt she had a lot more sort of big Doctor-y moments and got to seem a lot more in control of the situation, and got a lot more time to seem smart and deliver monologues and seem compassionate and generally do things.
Yeah, she was excellent in this series. There's some great monologues and does really, really great performances mean, she really has kind of like made the Doctor like her own as a character. I feel it doesn't feel like she's doing an impression of the zany David Tennant or the grimmer Christopher Eccleston. She's kind of got her own thing, going on, and her own sort of take on the Doctor has very much come to the fore. And I'm here for it. I really like it.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that it's taken 2 years to get there, and if she lives the same life as the other Doctors, she's probably only got one series left. But yeah,
they usually do 3 series over like 4 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows what timescales are like in this modern world, but yeah, they normally seem to do about 3 series and then bugger off. Obviously, she's coming back. I think she said she's coming back, but what happens beyond that, who knows? Maybe she'll break the cycle and do 4.
Yeah.
Anyway, do we want to leave a tiny bit of spoiler space and then gamble on to the finale?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about the finale. So this is the point where if you haven't seen Doctor Who Series 12 and you don't want to know how it ends, skip forward to the Better Call Saul review, timestamps in the episode as normal. Yeah, so let's just go into it now. Final warnings. So obviously there's the big finale, which is the first one of the 2-parters is kind of about the war between the few surviving humans against the Cybermen, which was, I know, had some alright action sequences and some semi-decent military stuff, which I know I felt it really did sort of up the ante a bit as we got towards the end. But then the last episode, which was also slightly longer than the average episode, really did leave me cold. It was all the sort of bad stuff from the Moffat years. There was a weird mystery that didn't really have a satisfactory answer, and it did come around to a lot of people just, mainly the Master and the Doctor, just standing around monologuing, pointing and just talking at each other, and eventually someone presses a button and it's over.
Yep. I'm not going to blame Moffat for it, because if anything, I actually thought a lot of the Moffat series finales were better than this. But yeah, I felt like it was mostly the staticness of this sort of retcon. I mean, I don't know. In a lot of TV shows I've watched, and I have, as you may have noticed if you've followed this podcast, watched a lot of TV, generally you put the massive lump of exposition in the penultimate episode, and then you use the finale to show you how that exposition leads to an actual interesting story. I mean, I'm not saying that Chris Chibnall should have written what I think amounted to about half an hour of exposition, but he should ideally have both made it shorter and put it in the previous episode, is what I'm saying, and then use the finale to actually throw to a story.
Yeah.
Because, I don't particularly like the retcon either, but I'm willing to let him show me the good story it leads to. But it did not lead to a good series finale this time. Yeah, it just led to, a lot of static standing around. I thought the episode before that, as Alistair said, it did an okay job of raising the ante, but I just don't think this sort of out of normal life sci-fi stuff is really Chris Chibnall's strength. It just felt a bit like a flat runaround.
It didn't seem very Doctor Who, is one thing I say about it. Suddenly, like, getting all gunny and, like, explosion-y and sort of post-apocalyptic fighting. I felt like, well, I'm here for your post-apocalyptic, the few surviving humans fighting the kind of weird techno monster thing that's coming to kill them. I mean, that's very much my bag, but it didn't feel very Doctor Who, really.
No, that's also true. I don't know, I felt like they could have done a bit more with the Cyberman, half-finished Cyberman villain guy, who Wikipedia tells me is called Ashad. Yeah, I felt like for it to work, he really needed to be a really, really interesting, compelling villain, and although he worked okay in the Frankenstein episode as this sort of lumbering monster, by the time we've had 3 episodes of him, he was less good. And yeah, I feel like the fact that the Master basically wrote him out with a wave of the hand in the final episode, and it didn't seem very important at all, should be a clue as to how that character hadn't really worked.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did feel that it's basically like that. Someone had been set up as like almost like the main villain of the finale, just kind of just disappeared, just so we could have the Master come in, take the spotlight, and then monologue for half an hour.
I mean, it would have worked quite well if we'd really been convinced that Ashad was a really interesting, charismatic, memorable villain. The Master suddenly coming in and elbowing him aside would have actually been quite a good bit, but because he was always a bit of a boring henchman, it was absolutely no surprise when the Master came and took over the episode. And to be honest, if anything, it was a bit of a relief when he just got rid of Ashad for us.
Yeah. The other thing I really didn't like is that the Cybermen, Gallifreyan crossover regenerative Cybermen were kind of cool, and then they just stood there and then got killed and they did absolutely nothing with it. It was exactly like when they created the human Dalek Time Lord hybrids in the Daleks of Manhattan episode way back in the Tennant years. And basically, I was very much like, oh, this is cool, an interesting thing they've added to the Doctor Who universe, and they've all been killed and without really contributing anything or doing anything. What was the point in setting that up?
Yeah, that was actually one of my other notes. Yeah, the Time Lord Cybermen, I thought, was one of the main bits in the finale that I've actually thought, okay, this is cool. This is a sort of Russell T Davies-esque ludicrous image you've just pulled up. It's a fun sort of mash-up of concepts, but it doesn't really do anything. And then, of course, in the ending, the Doctor kills them all, or allows that guy played by Grandad from Derry Girls to kill them all. And yeah, even that seemed a bit out of character for the Doctor, who is generally against the killing them all.
Yeah, it was very much, again, didn't seem very Doctor Who. Yeah, and it was even also one bit, I mean, there was literally a bit when the Doctor and him are arguing over which one's going to blow them up. And I was just like, just shoot them. They're like standing there arguing about who's going to press the button. Like, just shoot them. And then she hands over the bomb and runs away. Then the Master's like, kill him now. And it's like, and I know it's like, it's a TV panto basically, but it was very much like, kind of like, what is the Master doing while they're arguing about killing him?
Yeah, it just felt like TV sci-fi in the most sort of generic way possible. I didn't really feel like he'd added anything or created anything or come up with any interesting way of doing it. It just felt a bit hackneyed.
Yeah, which I felt quite disappointed by, because I felt so much of this series hinged on the finale when they started throwing out big mysteries. It was like, oh yeah, an interesting mystery. I really liked the episode, the one right in the middle, which threw out some mystery, and I was like, oh, what's all this stuff? I want to find out what it is. I'm intrigued. And then it just really didn't pay off, and I know I keep coming back to it, but it just reminded me so much of what I didn't like about the Moffat years. So much like, ooh, an interesting mystery about the Doctor's name. Like, wonder what this will be. Oh, it's just a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, it's the retcon. To briefly talk about what the retcon actually is, just so I can talk about it. The retcon obviously is that the Time Lord's regenerative ability was given to them by splicing it in from a mysterious being who fell through from another dimension and was found by a Time Lord and then discovered this ability and genetically engineered it into the rest of their species. And it turns out that being is the Doctor. She is the original Time Lord or something. And she's actually the one of them who's actually from another dimension. I'm not sure the Doctor needed to be more of the chosen one, to be honest.
Yeah.
Which is the main reason I find it slightly annoying and pointless. And also, it just seems like something that's either going to have to be written back out or just ignored by future writers, because I'm not sure what it really adds.
This is an interesting thing, which is that something about the history of Doctor Who is that when Doctor Who began, it was very much based around this mystery, like, who is the Doctor, where did they come from? There was part of the appeal, which was basically, there was like, this is who's the Doctor, they don't have a name, you don't know where they come from, they travel in time and space. And then over time, they unpicked that and revealed kind of who the Doctor was and who the Time Lords were and things like that. And basically, it kind of took some of the magic out of it when you kind of knew what the deal was. So then, in the very late Classic Who, the sort of Sylvester McCoy era, and I can't remember the person's name, but whoever's running the show decided they'd put some mystery back into the show. And they came up with this idea, basically, that the Doctor was more than a Time Lord, or the Doctor was someone, even special amongst Time Lords. They drop it in almost like quite heavily in like a few classic Who episodes. There's the Adventure Silver Nemesis, their 25th anniversary episode they did, which also had the Cybermen in it as well. I guess Silver Nemesis, Cybermen. Anyway, that episode hinges on that quite cleverly. So I think on some level, Chibnall was picking up that thread, although crucially he may have missed the point, which is that question over why is the Doctor special amongst Time Lords. I don't think they were ever going to answer it, because they were learnt the lesson from the previous time they had a mystery about the Doctor, which is once you answer it, it takes some of the magic out of the show. So it was trying to put the magic back in.
Well, yeah, but this is why Moffat never actually told you the Doctor's name.
Exactly.
I mean, it does kind of raise the question of why he bothered tugging on the thread in the first place. But, he knows it would be stupid to actually reveal it.
Yeah, exactly. Because also, whatever it is, it would be a disappointment. And also, what this ultimately was, disappointment. But I think there was something Chibnall was trying to connect to in Classic Who, but in some way, like, kind of missed the point along the way.
I mean, it does, as I said earlier, a lot of this does, to an extent, pivot on what he does with it, and it's entirely possible that Season 13 will convince me this was actually an amazing idea. I'm not entirely ruling it out. I'm, to be honest, more focused on the way the retcon was delivered rather than the retcon. But it does seem a lot like something which is going to end up being discarded as an annoying complication. But basically, I guess it does open up the mystery of where the Doctor originally came from, which I assume is what we're now going to go back to.
Also, the fact there was a period of the Doctor's past that was blanked out in the Matrix. The period that's pre the first Doctor, I guess.
Yeah, and at some point the Doctor was a secret agent for the Division or something.
Yeah, that as well, yeah.
Which is, again, not something I find... I think, kind of as you were saying, this doesn't feel very Doctor Who. I don't really need the Doctor to have had a secret past when she was part of the Time Lord CIA. You know, it doesn't actually massively interest me. But again, I'm willing to be surprised, but I'm not quite sure what the point is.
Yeah, exactly. So they've now created more mysteries. And again, there might be a good payoff from this, but I don't know, piling more mystery into more mystery, I think rarely with Doctor Who leads to satisfactory conclusions. I'm trying to think of the series that ends really well. Ones where they had like a straightforward mystery they could have a satisfactory answer to, such as what is Bad Wolf, or whether they could just bring the series down to basically there's a mystery. The mystery is there's a villain hidden somewhere here. We'll reveal who that villain is. Oh, it's the Master. Let's have a good showdown with the Master. The end. A la Series 3. But I do think going a bit beyond that and just piling mystery on top of mystery ultimately leads to unsatisfactory endings, and I think that's very much the lesson of this series.
Yeah, as I say, Series 13 will happen eventually. We'll probably be back, and then we'll find out if this was leading anywhere. But yeah, I felt like they should have probably gone somewhere with this retcon so they could prove to me, a horrible, cynical man, that it actually means something.
Next up, we'll be reviewing the 5th series of Better Call Saul. Jimmy McGill is back being a lawyer and working under the alias Saul Goodman, where he defends low-level criminals in New Mexico from justice. Although in this series, he's slowly been drawn into the service of the cartel, and his sort of slightly shady wheelie-dealing as a lawyer is beginning to affect his relationship with his corporate lawyer girlfriend, Kim Wexler. We've seen the first 6 episodes of this series, so Nick, what did you think of it?
Yeah, this continues to be a very good, very strong, reliable TV show. It's very continuously moving train, Better Call Saul. It's always there, it's always chugging along at a very steady pace, obsessing over individual bits of process, moving inexorably towards the conclusion where nearly everybody in the cast gets fucked. Like, yeah, this is very much one of these shows where, you know, everyone's flaws are probably going to catch up with them, and the main point of interest, I think, for me at this stage, is finding out whether the few characters in this who aren't also in Breaking Bad manage to get out alive, or undestroyed. So yeah, I'm still very much enjoying this thing. Although I was okay with the pacing of the previous 4 series, the years and years they've made us wait to see Jimmy go into full Saul mode, and I do like the fact that they have jumped straight to it. I thought maybe they'd do like a year or so of him getting his training wheels on, but no, he's very much playing Saul Goodman as Saul Goodman pretty much immediately, which I guess should be a character point about exactly how much this other personality or other style of lawyering has been just sort of waiting inside him to come out, as we've sort of seen it poking around the edges in previous seasons. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I still think I may have said this when we covered season 4, but if I didn't say it, I certainly thought it, that some of the crime stuff does start to feel maybe a bit prequely. I can't say I'm as interested in the Mike storylines as I maybe was in the first couple of seasons. Yeah, the Mike and Gus stuff, it's like a bit, I know what happens to you, and I don't really care that much how the hole from the lab in Breaking Bad got dug. But yeah, the Jimmy and Kim stuff I think is still pretty excellent. So yeah, that's me.
It is a very good show, one of the best things on TV, and it's been consistently good. If anything, it's been like just kind of consistently getting better with each series. Like it can be really, really funny, but it can be also be incredibly dramatic. Some bits is almost like so tense, but kind of in that awkward way that you just want to, you know, hide behind a cushion. I mean, I guess we're going to drop spoilers quite liberally for the first 6 episodes.
Yeah, well, we've seen the first 6 episodes. I'm planning on spoiling all the way up to the cliffhanger of episode 6 eventually.
Yeah, but not quite at the cliffhanger yet. There's a scene in episode 6 when Saul is defending a grumpy old man whose home is going to be demolished by Mesa Verde, the bank that Kim Wexler, his girlfriend, sort of is the head lawyer for, or one of the main lawyers for, because they want to build a call center. And Saul gets them to back off or abandon demolishing this guy's home through a combination of blackmail and slander, which he presents to them in one sort of big monologue in a sort of meeting that just goes disastrously wrong for everyone, including Saul's girlfriend, who's, I guess, the opposing counsel. And it's brilliant, but it's just so tense and sort of, you can just, I mean, it's so well acted. She is brilliant in this show, and she's brilliant in that. She just looks shocked, angry, betrayed, all at the same time. And it's just, it's kind of, it's sort of like, you know, original David Brent Office level kind of, oh, I'm feeling awkward sort of watching this, but also it's a brilliant bit of TV drama. So that's just one excellent scene, and the show is packed with scenes like that.
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of implied earlier, and as I've said ever since we started covering this show, the sort of willingness to have these long scenes where you really dig into the process of something has always been part of Better Call Saul's thing, and part of how it distinguishes itself from Breaking Bad as well. Yeah, it means that you tend to get this quite long, slow build-up to things. Like, we saw the first 6 episodes, and I'd say that, yeah, a lot of those first 6 episodes did feel like they were sort of building and building and building to a big flashpoint, which, luckily for us, has kind of come with this 6th episode. Like, it was that meeting scene with Jimmy and Kim that well, Saul and Kim, I guess, that Alistair just mentioned, which did feel like the culmination of a lot of what's been happening between them and where the plot has been going for the previous 5 episodes. I'm assuming what's going to happen now is the crime plot is finally going to interface with the Saul plot, probably related to the fact that one of the crime characters has just been arrested. I imagine we'll get involved with Saul quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I imagine that will be the final rock on the scale that will carry us through to whatever disaster happens at the end of the season.
I mean, this show loves a process montage, but it's been such an established thing in the show by this point that when you see a process montage, when Saul or Mike invariably are getting down to some kind of big task, you just make you think like, oh, I really want to see what it is when this all comes together. What is it that they're planning? What are they sort of diligently working on in the small hours of the morning or whatever? Like in this episode, which begins with Saul doing some kind of elaborate green screen video shoot. Yeah, it makes you think, yeah, well, there's got to be some excellent payoff for this, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. I mean, not to go back to reviewing Doctor Who, but like Chris Chibnall, take note. That's how you build up a kind of, ooh, there's a mystery. I wonder what that is, and then deliver something that's satisfactory.
Well, yeah, it's the sort of the trademark Better Call Saul move, aside from the montage, which they do very well, is the sort of showing you a tiny little thing, a little slightly incongruous moment. Like there's a scene at the start of the episode, it's probably either 4 or 5. Saul goes into a thrift shop or a second-hand electronics or general junk shop or something and just starts hefting objects around to see which one feels best in his hand or something.
Yeah, starting with like old tellies.
Yeah, all sorts of crap. Old tellies. I think there's a lamp or something. Yeah, and ending up with a bowling ball. And they just show you him doing this, and then they just cut away to, I think, the credits. And it's not explained at all. He doesn't tell you what he's doing. All you know is that Jimmy/Saul has gone into this shop, hefted some objects, chosen the object that hefts best for him, and then left. And because you've seen this show at this point, you know, it's the 40-something episode, you know that at some point he's going to heft that object right into the middle of the plot.
Yeah.
And you're just sort of sitting there waiting for it to fly through the air at some point in the episode, and they just do that sort of thing again and again and again.
And then it's the very last bit of that episode, is it?
Possibly, yeah. The last or towards the end, yeah.
Yeah. Or they start with like a brilliant character bit, such as the 6th episode. Begins with an entirely unrelated scene of teenage Kim Wexler having been left outside her mum late for picking her up from school because she's been at a bar and then is clearly drunk driving. So sensible Kim decides to walk home. And I guess the lesson you take from that is that Kim's used to being let down by the people she loves. And then obviously we can go into episode where Jimmy / Saul completely pulls a fast one on her against her will and against her specific instructions. Yeah, there's just always these kind of great like character bits or even sometimes bits that are entirely unnecessary but are sort of odd. Like there's an episode when in the plot line of Saul being sort of slowly being brought in to work for Nacho, and this new character, one of the Salamanca sort of Mexican cartel family. The episode ends with him being kind of grabbed by them and put in a car, or like, not grabbed physically, but like told in no uncertain words to get in, and then he drops an ice cream on the side. The next episode, the first like 2 minutes, is just like close-up footage of ants eating the ice cream. Doesn't add anything to the plot other than to create this kind of awful sense of foreboding.
I mean, I think there's probably a metaphor in there somewhere about how the ice cream indicates that, you know, is a representation of Saul wandering along, feeling happy about his new life, and the ants represent, you know, the fact he's about to get fucked.
Yeah, or they represent death, or the devouring of dead things and stuff. I do really like the new Salamanca character they've introduced, partly because he's obviously not in Breaking Bad at all. And I think this is really good because obviously there was Hector who, you know, we first saw him walking around, talking, yelling at people. And you're like, okay, he's going to have a massive stroke at some point, end up in a wheelchair. Not a lot of tension in that because we know where it's going, but when it happened. But now, they've introduced a new character who's not in Breaking Bad, so it's just create the sense of mystery. Like, what is going to happen to this person? We know that Gus and Mike want him disposed of, probably permanently, in this sort of, you know, Breaking Bad way. But will it happen? What will happen? Who knows? There's a real sense of tension around that new character introduced, and I think he's an interesting new character.
I think him being introduced has, yeah, definitely fired up the crime section of the storyline a little bit for me. As I must admit, it was starting to get a little bit flat for me. And I think, it does seem to be turning up the tension a bit in that area, which is good. As I'm not enjoying Gus in this show as much as I thought I would. He never seems to have any cool bits to do.
No, and I guess we kind of maxed out on cool Gus in Breaking Bad. Now I was thinking like, well, I kind of know what the deal with Gus is. Like, you know, when he first appears and you think he's just a guy who runs like a chicken restaurant, and slowly gets revealed that he's like a mob boss and also sort of a psychopath and utterly ruthless. You know, but now you know all that, it's kind of very much like baked in. He's just this kind of like evil presence, almost like the Emperor in Star Wars. He just turns up to be evil and ruthless.
Well, yeah, I mean, they already did a lot of the Gus prequel material in Breaking Bad, didn't they? Like flashbacks to him and his associates meeting up with the cartel and getting involved with the drugs and so on.
And being killed by his long-term friend, being murdered by the Salamancas, and his sort of quest for revenge against them.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of the problem with I think some of the crime storyline. But I think characters like Nacho and Lalo, where we don't know exactly what's going to happen to them. I mean,
Nacho is another one in there, and obviously Nacho is a great character partly because Michael Mando is so good in that role, and he's so good in almost anything he does.
He is great. I think it's based off like a one-line bit from Breaking Bad when one of the times Saul first appears, he's being shaken down by some cartel guys and shouting, "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio," when they take the hood off his head or something. And I guess they've taken that back and used it to drive this entire prequel.
Yeah, that actually, I had noticed that. So that's some good Breaking
obviously
Bad
I'm
memory.
not clever enough to notice that. I was told it online.
Yeah, but no, that is good. But yeah, Nacho's a character who's great, and again, there's that sense of mystery of like what is going to become of him. I mean, as you said, the big things I'm really invested in this show for is to find out what becomes of primarily Kim and Nacho, because they're not in Breaking Bad. What will happen to them? How will they get ejected from the story? Will it be alive or with their sense of self intact? Also, to a lesser degree, what's going to happen to Mike's daughter-in-law and granddaughter, in that you don't get the sense from Breaking Bad that Mike's got a separate life where he's happily hanging out with his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. So I don't know. I
occasionally wonder if they've missed some sort of shade of nuance with the Mike character. I don't know. It's hard to exactly describe. It's just, I get the feeling they want us to think there's going to be a moment where he turns some corner and loses his soul in the same way that Jimmy is going to. I don't feel like there's that many shades between Better Call Saul Mike and Breaking Bad Mike. He's a bit more murdery.
I mean, they were so good in the first series when he's just stoic the whole way through, and then there's that episode when you find out about the death of his son, and the actor who does stoic so well has his breakdown and cries and things like that, and it's a phenomenal piece of acting from Jonathan Banks, probably one of the highlights of the first series of Better Call Saul, and that bit was great, and it really added another dimension to the Mike character, and they've not really been able to get back to that since. I mean, there was a good bit in this series when everything's going well with him looking after his granddaughter, then when she brings up her dad, his son, and he has a very uncharacteristic Mike moment of not being cool and calm. Yeah, but they never really quite recapture that bit in the first series when he has a total kind of Mike breakdown.
I mean, maybe this is just me being an empathy-free monster. I think him killing that German guy at the end of the last series, spoilers lads, was meant to be a massive crossing of the Rubicon for him executing this guy basically just because his boss told him to and he knows too much, rather than because he's actually done anything to really deserve it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, again, it might be, I don't know if it's the show or me, but I don't know if they entirely sold that to me.
Yeah, the Mike plot I'm not really there for. I mean, it's not bad, but like it lacks tension, and like you say, I don't think at some point they've missed some of the shades of nuance in Mike. But I am, obviously mainly there for the Saul Kim story, and also to find out what happens to Nacho. Also, Saul's slightly petty sort of vendetta against Howard, his erstwhile employer, is funny, but also again it's kind of British office level kind of awkward.
Yeah, it's both sort of enjoyably sitcom petty, but also it's a very clear marker. But the hope that Saul's going to go back to being nice guy Jimmy is, I don't know, it does make it a bit harder to fully believe that.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things I love about the show is that Bob Odenkirk is excellent in the show, and he's so good. He's so good at the character, and he's great in everything. I mean, he was a surprise appearance in Little Women this year.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, for those who have read the book or have seen the film or haven't seen it, it's obviously a lot of the book is based around waiting for the father to come back from the American Civil War. And this adaptation actually leaned more on the character of the four sisters rather than, which other previous adaptations have emphasis more on the waiting for the father aspect of it. Because Little Women's got to be about a man ultimately. But anyway, but when the father turns up and it's Bob Odenkirk, I was really like, oh wow, that's just a great sort of like cameo appearance. And he has a few excellent scenes. But yeah, that's just my way of saying like I'm here for basically Bob Odenkirk in almost anything.
Yeah, no, he's great in this. He's clearly been a good dramatic actor ever since, he started getting more to do in sort of the mid to late seasons of Breaking Bad. But yeah, his stuff in the last few seasons of Better Call Saul, as he manages this sort of Jimmy to Saul transition, have been really great. And this sort of his attempt to balance the two sides of his life and justify what he's doing to himself in ways that clearly sound like bullshit as soon as he says them out loud, which is a big part of the end of the most recent episode 6, when he has to try and justify his obvious massive betrayal to Kim, and she just sort of stares at him.
Yeah.
There's one season left of this show after this season. Very curious what that season's going to look like, because there's a part of me that doesn't see the Jimmy-Kim relationship lasting beyond the end of this season.
No. I mean, I really thought it was finished in this episode 6. When the bit's the end, when she comes in, she's so angry with him with the way that he betrayed her and did everything she said not to do. Risked her career and everything. I did have a moment of like, okay, so this is the moment, this is the breakup, this is the end of their relationship. We know it's been coming for 5 series, I guess. The moment has finally arrived. And then it pivots hard to, well, the episode ends with her saying, we've got to break up or we could get married. And then it sort of ends there. And there's like, I mean, what a hell of a cliffhanger to leave it on. But yeah, that was great, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I guess they built this character of Kim in a very sort of clever way, but it's easy to think of her as the sort of the sensible lawyer one, but also, reliably, at least a few times a season, she always wants to, she always gets bored of being the sensible lawyer one and wants to run off and have fun with Jimmy, which is why their relationship still persists.
Yeah, whenever he refers to her as Giselle, which is her code name when they're doing dodgy things like this. They do some low-level conning in, I think, the second series, when they pretend, he pretends to be Saul and she's Giselle, and there's a bit when they're, I think, hiring a PI together in this episode when Mike's not available, and he refers to her as Giselle, which is like, I know, the code name for that.
Honestly, part of me was always hoping they'd go with it a bit further, with Saul and Kim working together, but I think ultimately it was always going to be a bit too much. Well, I don't know where they're going to take it in the last 4 episodes, but it was always going to be a bit too much for her when she saw him actually doing this to her case.
Yeah, or see the way he plays fast and loose with the law.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten quite how much bullshit Saul Goodman produces.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. There's something about the character which I think is brilliant, and it's in the way Bob Odenkirk plays it. There's almost something. It's almost like, I don't know. I was going to say Faustian, but I don't mean Faustian as in, people say Faustian, they think pact with the devil. Where one of the things about Dr. Faust, which is the sense of like, Faust is inevitably damned from the beginning, or is he inevitably damned from the beginning, or does he have a choice over it? And I think there's something very Better Call Saul about this. If you assume that becoming Saul is the road to damnation, because we know where that road leads, it leads to Breaking Bad and Walter White ruining his life. So I guess the question is, was Jimmy McGill inevitably always going to become Saul and have his life ruined by Walter White, or was there any chance of him taking a different path? And his weakness that leads to his downfall, his damnation, is the character of Saul's love of the hustle. He doesn't think he particularly like being a lawyer. What he likes is hustling, kind of doing these big cons or big pranks almost, or things like that, or spending all night working on something, getting it just right so that when it lands it totally catches whoever he's trying to con, out lawyer, or con stroke out lawyer. You can tell that's what the character loves, and that's what he's excited about, but he can't stop doing that, even when it's ruining, even though his girlfriend told him not to, and it's clearly going to ruin their relationship, but he can't stop himself. And that inability to not do a Saul Goodman hustle prank is what is leading him on the road to destruction. And I think is really interesting how they've kind of presented that, and that's kind of, I feel like, the essence of the character.
Well, yeah, the fact that, I mean, kind of like the Adam Sandler character in Uncut Gems, the fact that even when he could leave it well enough alone, he's clearly going to go back and try and twist the knife one more time, or get a little bit more, or just do it just for fun.
Yeah, he just can't resist. It's in his nature. It's inevitable. Yeah, just like it's inevitably in Faust's nature to be damned.
Yeah, I think it's a big sort of clue to the quality of this show. That I think if you go back and listen to our early reviews of Better Call Saul, we spent quite a lot of time going, "Oh, when's Walter White going to turn up?" There's very little of that now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want that. Like you say, that the plot line with the building of the underground lab is
prequel shit.
Yeah, it's just not very interesting. I'm trying to go this whole review without doing my Nathan Dighton prequel critique, because I think we mention it every time we discuss
any prequel, and
we've done, this is like our third Better Call Saul review, and it's
also, I've basically said it already without mentioning Nathan Dighton.
Yeah, exactly. To go back to your point, I don't want there to be a Walter White, or there was a brief appearance of Hank in an episode, and then which was, I think, a good episode and a good cameo appearance of a Breaking Bad character. I'm not particularly down for there to be an extended Hank arc in this. But, what I want is Saul, Kim, Nacho, the characters that this show has made me love, rather than cameo appearances from characters I loved in other shows.
Well, yeah, that's why I'm kind of curious whether Kim is going to be around next season, and if she isn't, what they're going to replace her with. Are they finally going to do Breaking Bad shit? Are they going to end this segment of the storyline and jump aggressively to the sort of black and white Gene Takovich section?
Yeah, well, one thing you said in previous reviews, which would be interesting, is they could conceivably say end this series with Saul in the different office he's based in. I think they haven't got to the point when he moves premises, and it might just end with Jesse and Walter White walking in and just end there and then jump from that to the kind of post-Breaking Bad because we don't need that part filled in.
Yeah, I genuinely don't know how they're going to pull off the finale season. I'm almost desperate to get this over with so we can get there. Although considering the number of middle-aged to old men in the cast, they may want to wait till coronavirus is finished.
Yeah, this is probably a show that they can't really film during coronavirus time, so yeah.
So yeah, we might be here a while before the 6th and final season of Better Call Saul, but hopefully we'll get it eventually.
I'd rather them wait and do it right. I mean, they didn't do one last year.
No, they didn't do it last year for reasons which I could only find attributed to talent needs, which I assume means someone was busy. Maybe Bob Odenkirk was busy filming Little Women, who knows?
Yeah.
Although he wasn't in it that much. But yeah, assuming that coronavirus doesn't ravage the cast, I'm sure it'll happen eventually.
Yeah, but I'm loving it. I guess we might check in at some point when we get to the end of the series 5, but it continues to be, I think, one of the best things on TV. I mean, just an example is that I was talking to a friend on the phone the other day and we were going over our coronavirus recommendations. I promise this is the last time I mentioned the virus. I say, now what's really good to watch now that you've finally got all the time in the world to watch TV? And I said to my friend, like, if you've got to watch Better Call Saul.
I assume this friend has seen Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not Better Call Saul.
Okay, yeah, in that case it's a fair recommendation. To be honest, maybe I'll finally get to the point where I rewatch Breaking Bad. Maybe I'll try and do that before the last series of Better Call Saul airs.
Yeah, I'm very excited for where this goes. It is like a nice little treat each week.
Okay, and that's it for this long-awaited comeback episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence. Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can, of course, get more content by us, including our various very topical Best of 2019 lists on the moderatefantasyviolence.com website, along with all our previous episodes and a few extended scenes from them. You could also, if you've enjoyed our stuff, why not go to your podcast platform of choice, such as iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else, and leave us a nice review so that other people can get back on the show now we're actually doing episodes again. Thank you.
You can also follow us on Twitter, where we're at MFV Podcast, or find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. You can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Alistair J.R. Ball, or you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
And I'm Nick MB on Twitter, or there's more from me at nickbryan.com, including details of my comics, which will hopefully be continuing despite whatever happens to the wider world. And yep, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode to deliver more opinions of things you should watch in quarantine. And again, we're covering something we both very much like, but sadly missed a chance to cover on time. It's the last series of The Good Place. And then, in a slightly deeper dive, we'll be covering Spanish sci-fi film The Platform, which is on UK Netflix if you want to get on that before we cover it. Okay, see you then. Bye.
Bye.
Like, there's a scene at the start of the episode, it's probably either 4 or 5, where the character Saul Goodman, whose name is not Better Call Saul, goes into the man better known as Better Call Saul,